Good evening, everybody. I have been thinking about national anthems lately. Why have I been thinking about national anthems? Well, a recent show has been going out and about lately, and everybody started talking about this show. But before I talk about that, I would like to talk about a whole bunch of variety of different anthems that exist all around the world right now. I did a little bit of research and I've kind of come across largely 4 different categories. And the first category that I want to talk about is anthems as essentially love letters to a country. First one that I want to talk about is Japan, because not only is it the shortest one by far, using Japanese poetry as a way to dedicate an adoration for its country, but it's also got a bit of a kind of natural kind of feel to it. The whole idea is that the Japanese people are essentially giving a blessing to their country in the vein of Shintoism, for example, saying that they want it to last forever and have it thrive and have it continue to exist. One thing that I find kind of funny about the Japanese anthem is that it kind of has a sort of almost like, oh wait, no, I thought of something better right in the middle of it. Like it says that they want it to last for 1,000 generations, and then immediately they're just like, no, 8,000 generations. Why not, right? Along with that, I'm kind of thinking along the lines of Australia. The Australian national anthem largely just seems to be a kind of thankfulness to the land for, supplying everything that they need in order to live and to thrive and all that kind of good stuff. Australia's anthem is actually quite nice. It's very, very pleasant to listen to. Been hearing it a lot on Formula One lately. Good job, Oscar. I'm from Canada. Canada does seem to follow this way kind of thing, a sort of thankfulness to the land and what it provides to the people and its ability to provide for everybody and in its vastness and how large it is and the fact that it could provide for everybody that wants to come here kind of thing. There's an interesting addendum here, which is the Russian national anthem, which follows a similar trend to the rest of them in the sense that it's a love letter to the country, but it's it feels like it's written by an 8-year-old kind of thing. I'm sure it probably sounds quite nice in Russian. I'm sure it does. But referencing Russia as our favorite country is just it just makes me think that this is something that's some kid had to write in their elementary school class. Why is Russia your favorite country? 'Cause it's my favorite. The second category of anthems that I want to talk about is a kind of anthems as a sort of dedication to their national leaders. And for this I want to start off with Korea, because despite the geographical closeness with Japan and Korea, they're both poems originally, but they don't follow a similar fruit line. Japan, the anthem is all about loving the country and, hoping that it lives a long time, that it continues to thrive. Whereas in Korea, it's essentially long live the emperor, that's basically it. It's longer, but that's essentially what it boils down to. The famous one would be the British one, which is essentially just, we hope that the king continues to provide for us kind of thing, and that the king can, keep doing kingly things. Interestingly, because of Queen Elizabeth recently dying, it's the most recent example where the anthem actually changes depending on the living monarch, and it's one of the few that actually references a living monarch in general. Most anthems don't really do that. In comparison, my ethnicity is Dutch, and the Dutch national anthem is kinda a little bit weird, kind of goofy. Well, first of all, it started off as a really long anthem. I think it's 15, 16 verses or something like that. The one that's commonly sung today is just 2 verses, verse 1 and verse 6, for whatever reason. It essentially came about talking about essentially the kind of figurehead of the Dutch separation from Spain and his kind of storyline. The first verse is essentially just giving a brief description of William of Nassau, William of Orange, William the Silent, many people would call, and it's essentially just his kind of initial backstory about how he was a serving noble under the Spanish king, and he was a loyal follower to the Spanish king, which is always kind of funny everybody kind of questions why Spain is mentioned in the Dutch anthem. It's all to do with the storyline of Dutch separation from Spanish rule. And you kind of got to start off saying, hey, the Dutch view them as not doing anything wrong, and all the wrong was done by Spain in that capacity. So yeah, it's a weird start to an anthem. But then the second anthem is essentially like a calling to God in order to retain your faithfulness, I guess. Very interesting second anthem. But it's all kind of on the basis that the whole story of this anthem is about the Dutch separation, along with its kind of correlation with the European wars of religion. And interestingly enough, it's actually one of the oldest European national anthems, despite the Dutch being a newer kind of country, at least on the Western European scheme of things. Most of the other Western European countries are much older than the Dutch one, but the Dutch have one of the oldest anthems, which brings us to most of the other European anthems, which tends to go on a fruit line of we're going to war kind of thing. The Irish one is particularly good for that. It's referencing of soldiers and going off to battle to defend your homeland kind of thing. France, very, very similar vein, motivated by the French Revolution. It's referencing raising your bloody standard and all that kind of stuff, right? All in the defense of revolutionary France. Italy is kind of weird as well, because they're all talking about going off to war, wearing the helmet of Scipio, we're marching to our deaths. They say that 4 times, but it's all done in like this weird, upbeat, jovial kind of tone, like, we're going to die. Hooray! It's very strange. China's an interesting one. China's also in the vein of going off to fight for war, and you would think that it would be a really old one, but it's actually one of the newest anthems that's ever been existed, basically describing the series of revolutions that happened in China post World War II and all of the kind of conflict and violence that was going on there, right? It's a very interesting, weird note there, where it was the anthem, then for a brief period it wasn't the anthem because the government was worried how it would look, then it became the anthem again. It's a very strange story, the Chinese anthem. Noticeably, there is another very strange one, and it's also Canada's anthem, but the French translation. It's strange because, it's Canada. You don't really think of this. The anthem itself seems quite medieval. There's a reference to bearing your cross on the vein of the Crusaders, right? There's, holding your sword and all that kind of stuff, right? It sounds quite strange and medieval. And I found that to be quite interesting because you compare the Canadian... We'll edit that out. And I find that very interesting because you compare the Canadian English anthem, which is kind of like, we like our country, we'll stand on guard for it kind of thing. It's very much a sort of love letter to the land itself. You compare that to the French anthem, which is very much about, we're willing to go to war in defense of Canada, but it turns Canada into almost like a person. This might be due to it being French being a Latin language and all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting how, despite the fact that they're put onto the same music, they have a very different tone when you look at the individual words themselves. Which lets me go on to the initiator of this topic, which was a couple weeks ago. I was, being the nerd that I absolutely am, and watching Star Wars videos on YouTube. As you do. And while I was scrolling all of these Star Wars videos, I kept on seeing in the comments section, just spontaneous references to We Are the Gore, and them all getting like a huge number of likes. I don't have Disney Plus, so I don't really understand what's going on here. I knew that Andor Season 2 was coming out. I really enjoyed the first season, but canceling Disney Plus meant that I wasn't going to watch that. And at first I thought that was totally fine. So I gave this a quick look up on YouTube and came across the scene that they were referencing here. scene for Andor Season 2, We Are the Gore, the anthem itself, is sung in a very interesting scene that starts off having very similar tones to the French Revolution, and then very quickly translating into the genocide kind of scene. And it's all kind of raising intention with the people in this kind of, revolt on the streets kind of scene, singing We Are the Gore, right? Singing their anthem. They sing it, allowing it to make a scene, and there's, that portion of it where they're singing We Are the Gore and like a huge mass of people, contemplative, almost like reminiscent of the French. They got a lot of French actors to do this, right?
La reste en brège. Jakem soit prendre kofef. Sa kofef bonflo d'anvet.
For a completely fictional place, a completely made-up language, made-up anthem, all of a sudden, everybody is just like, why does this make me feel stuff? And there's a whole variety of reasons for this, political situation aside. But I went to look at the lyrics, and I was wondering if there was a correlation between national anthems that are not only motivational for the nation it's speaking of, but also is considered quite nice on the international stage. The Australian anthem, the Canadian anthem are both very much for this. The Japanese anthem gets this as well. And I was wondering if there was a correlation between all of the seen as auditorially pleasing anthems and those anthems reminiscing on the international stage. And I found that they had a lot of similarities with that fictional anthem, We Are the Gore. Why is that? When you look at the actual anthem itself, it fits into one of the three categories. It very much fits into the love letter of the nation in a capacity. But it's not so much falling in love with the land itself, although that's definitely in there, but more so about the people, the culture, right? It's a fake anthem that rarely talks about the land that they're on, but it's more so about all the people and them coming together as a community and, living together in, relative harmony, right? Taking pride in what they're able to produce and what they're able to do on the international stage. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that there's a correlation between the popularity of this anthem and the scenes that it goes with in terms of how it reminisced and how it kind of forced itself into the memories of all of the fans watching the show. I think the fact that, the anthem is talking about the love that the people have for each other as a community, alongside with the fact that it's played with a scene where everybody in that community is being killed. I think it says a lot that that's what winds up happening there. But I think this goes on to say that in my weird kind of bunny trail of distraction being national anthems, I think that what I've been able to find is that national anthems that speak to the international world as a whole don't tend to talk about their war past, like a lot of those European ones, most of them written in the 1800s, after Napoleon. The anthems that sound good to the international community now, the wording of them don't relate to warfare at all. They also don't relate to one specific person, be it a generic, ruler of some kind, or a historical figure of the past, right? Rather, the nations that really correlate to us now are the ones that talk about loving the land and loving the community that the anthem is talking about. And I don't really know what that says about us in the present day and what we're all thinking about right now. I just find that wildly interesting. No idea what to make of that. But I'm going to go finish up dinner here. It's a quick one, but that's all right. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.